Hello there. Hello, hello. Welcome to Demystifying Mental Health, where we break down stigmas, learn the science of mental health, and discover actionable steps for a healthier and more empathetic you. I'm your host, Dr. Alana, trauma psychiatrist, and I'm here to educate the world about trauma and how it connects us all and the many, many ways that empathy heals. Y'all, it's time to evolve. I'm really excited about this topic today because it's such an important an important topic that is not talked about enough. And I want you to know from the beginning, here's my disclaimer that this episode talks about suicide. So if you are in crisis or you are, this might be triggering for you, I just want to let you know ahead of time there is help. If you're in crisis, you can see the resources that are tagged on the screen below. There is now a national suicide hotline, and that is accessible through 988. 988. And so you don't have to remember anything but that number. And there are people there who can talk to you, who can help you, who will support you in finding resources that can get you on the right track. But hopefully, within this episode, you'll learn some things that not only can be additive to whatever you're already doing, but maybe even open the door for healing in a new way. So just wanted to give that disclaimer before we got started. This episode is called Hope and Action Are Resistance: Suicide Prevention in a Time of Crisis. Now, crisis is sometimes on an individual level, on a personal level, you may be in crisis. And then also we can have community crisis. And I think it's pretty safe to say that for most of us, we can say that our country is in crisis. In fact, our globe is in crisis with all of the things that are going on. So even when there are not stressful things going on, there can be people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, with thoughts of wanting to hurt oneself or not even remaining here. We say unalive. So you'll hear me use certain words so that we don't step on the algorithm too much. But in particular, when there are crises going on in the world, that can inflame those feelings of hopelessness, those feelings of just wanting to not be around. And so we're going to talk more in depth in this episode about suicide, why the body and the brain, what's going on the inside during those moments. And then I also want to introduce you to an amazing resource that is going to, really give you more information on ways that you can connect to the communities who are doing great work in helping to address this crisis. So let's talk about some statistics. We're living in a time where suicide is one of the largest causes of death in the United States. And for Black youth in particular, the crisis is especially urgent. So looking at a four-year time span from 2019 to 2023, gun suicide rates rose sharply amongst Black people, okay? Which we're already dealing with these levels of crisis, and then of course the access to guns and the amount of the familiarity with it being so prevalent, we have had a big spike, increasing 45% compared to just 9% among our European American brothers and sisters. And so what we know is that when people use firearms, their attempts are more lethal. Some other statistics that we should be aware of is that in young people, although the overall rate of suicide decreased from 2023, that the rates increased amongst the African American population in particular in the same time span. So there is something actively happening that is driving our community in particular to be dealing with these things. So then we look at women. Amongst Black women, the risk rose about 20% in the last few years. So this also, just all of this data together just speaks to the crisis that we're in. There are so many things that cause people to hurt and feel pain. And so we know that between substance abuse, there's increase in bullying in real life and cyberbullying. We have a growing body of data and statistics that shows that social media can be damaging for one's mental health and increase the risk of depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And in fact, in our young people, it can be feeding the hope that, or it can be feeding the pain that they're experiencing, because in social media, people can post things that encourage them to self-harm or encourage them to engage in damaging behaviors. But what we do know is that when people get connected to the system, I think one of the things that is, because there's so much stigma about mental health, one of the beliefs that I hear quite often that's not true is that, well, if you bring it up, if you talk about it, you'll make a person think about it, and then it might make them do it. That has been proven to be false. When you ask someone, when you're willing to talk about it, when you're willing to engage a person, they're often willing to talk about it and wanting help, just feeling hopeless. And in this way, I think it's important for all of us, even if it's not something you personally deal with, but to actually have all of us feel at least decently comfortable with talking to someone who's struggling, because you can't look at someone and tell whether or not they're having suicidal thoughts. You can't see, we look at people and we go, well, they look so happy. You can smile and still have suicidal thoughts. You can have times of being happy and joyful and present quite well on the surface and be thinking about a lot of really painful things on the inside. So before I introduce our guests, I actually want to pause and frame this conversation with some brain science, because that's my thing, and some trauma insights. Understanding how the brain processes information is so important in understanding why suicide is so connected to deep feelings of despair and isolation or stress, and why suicide can feel like sometimes the person's only choice out. So I'm not going to go through all 6 of the primitive brain systems that you all hear me constantly talking about, but I will tell you that some in particular are involved when people are in a crisis state. So as I've mentioned, if we just start with the basics of, all of us are walking around with a physical body that you can touch and feel, your cells, your tissues, your brain, and then you have a psychological body. You can't put your finger on it, but you have thoughts, you have feelings, you have emotions, you have an invisible self that you don't always pay that much attention to. However, that our brain is taking in information through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our skin, and it's constantly calculating and kicking out conclusions and judgments. And along with those conclusions and judgments, it's creating sensations and surges and urges and things that we feel in our body, and those are emotions. And those emotions can be positive or negative, but they are created by your amygdala. Your amygdala is a part of your body that creates your internal sensations. We typically think about the amygdala as it relates to fear, but the amygdala causes all the emotions, and it does it very intensely. Sometimes they're in the background, but when you are a person who may be thinking about, like, I'm looking at my life and I don't like it. I don't like what I see. I don't feel like I can change it. I don't have the skills to do anything different. This is all I know. And you're experiencing overwhelming, painful circumstances, things that other people may not see. And in fact, like, you may be living in a household where you're constantly being invalidated, where your pain is being minimized by the people around you, not acknowledged. And even that on the inside causes pain. We have a part of our brain called the somatosensory cortex, where when we are experiencing psychological pain, like if somebody says something offensive, or even if you think something negative about yourself, your brain has an area that feels that slap, feels that pain, and literally sends out a burst of chemicals into your body to respond to the pain. Just like if you were punched, poked, or kicked, your brain deals with psychological pain in the same way. So that whole sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. BS. Okay. Look, I'm trying not to cuss. You know what I'm talking about. It's not true. And whoever said that, and anybody who says that, does not actually understand how their body and brain is designed. So when a person is in suicidal crisis, that somatosensory cortex is ringing and causing painful sensations. And it's coming from the thought processes about whatever's going on in their life. If I'm never going to have love again, that's a painful thought. And they'll feel that very intensely. I don't know how to fix this. I'm in a broken family. I'm in a broken relationship. My life is never going to change. I've lost so much money. I don't know how to get it back. That creates huge emotions from that amygdala and intense pain from that somatosensory cortex. So that when people have many people are experiencing that and don't even have the language to put to what's happening inside of them because we haven't been taught. Even those of us practicing in mental health are not taught about these brain systems and how our body is connected to our thought process so directly. But why that is really important before we go into the next element of our conversation, it's important to understand that traumatic situations, meaning any circumstance that's that painfully changes the way you think about yourself, other people, and the rest of the world, creates internal stress, creates brain and body responses that you feel in real time. And we might call it anxiety or panic or paranoia or anger or fear or desperation or whatever label you want to put on it. But it's still important to understand that that comes from our brain. GPS signal lost. And it comes from our brain and it comes from what's happening internally. So it's important to understand that suicide is not about a person being weak. It's not about someone failing. Oftentimes we think of it like, oh, why would you do that? How weak is that? It's about your brain being on overload and a perceived lack of options. So this is why talking about suicide and having the words and the ability to be there in that space with someone and address these things really can be so important, because connection is often the cure for that loneliness, because you can see and share perspective on things that the other person often can't see in the moment when they're intensely suicidal, and that their bubble of perception, how they're intaking the world, is so dark and negative that it makes them want to take their exit. So now that I've grounded us in some of the science of the suicidal mind, let's turn towards solutions. I'm honored to welcome our guest today, Bri Hagins, who is program manager for the Find Help initiative at To Write Love on Her Arms, otherwise known as TWLOHA. Bri works every day to connect people to life-saving care and reminds them that they're not alone. So please welcome with me, Brianna, or Bri. Hey, Bri.
Yes, it's fine. Hi, Dr. Alana. I'm so excited to be here. Just listening to you behind backstage, I'm like, yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm so excited to share the work of TWLOHA and to just get into what TWLOHA does, because it's been extremely impactful for me. I've been able to send multiple people to TWLOHA who I know that are struggling, and they're able to get resources that they were not able to access before. So just before we get into that, tell them a little bit about To Write Love on Her Arms.
So, To Write Love on Her Arms is a mental health nonprofit. I know her is in our title, but it's a general statement, everybody. And it started with a story of an individual, Renee. She was having some problems and was trying to get treatment. She couldn't afford it. She was, doing some self-harm, and her friends rallied around her and started selling t-shirts. And here we are 20 years later, still connecting people to resources, addressing that barrier, and being that bridge of hope for people from the care that and access to care that they need, and just being able to get them to that.
Hmm. So from one person's pain and the community coming together around that person, we now have an organization that's helping thousands, right? Millions ultimately. So I think it's important, and I want to point that out, because often the thing that breaks the cycle of suicidality is finding purpose and recognizing that there is something that you can take out of the worst. I'm talking about the worst thing that can ever happen to someone, whatever it is that you imagine in that moment. I've seen people take those experiences and turn them into something beautiful that sustains them because they allow their most painful moments to be an example for someone else. A lot of times when we're going through trauma, we don't talk to other people about it. You know, we might tell our brother, sister, friend, or family or something like that, but we don't usually share that with the world in a broad way because people often feel ashamed about whatever they're going through that's causing them to have those suicidal thoughts, right? So when people start standing up and telling their story and being open about it, they start realizing that, wait a minute, this somebody said, hey, I was going through that and your story touched me. Or I've seen something like that before. And I thought back to something that you said years ago that helped me get through that moment, right? So just from your perspective and your work at TWLOHA, how do you see these societal pressures showing up in the lives of the people that you all support? Like how can community and supportive relationships make a difference for someone who's going through a suicidal crisis?
Well, I will definitely say, as the second part of your question, community is everything. I know in my life, I call my community my lifeliners, because they were just that light in a dark time for me, where it really wasn't a light. And, you know, I speak for myself, but I know that others who are supporters of our organization have been in that same situation where they didn't see hope, they didn't see light. But like you said, that one person just decides to speak up about it and they say something and it just resonates. It's like, wow, okay, I'm not alone. It's somebody else that is dealing with this. Especially in answering the first part of your question, the stigma, the lack of education surrounding mental health, especially in the African American community. One of my mentors, Dr. Rosalind Burnett, she just finished her study on restrictive emotionality in African American men. And just to hear some of the upbringings and perceptions of some of the African American men as far as expressing emotion, being able to cry, it's just mind blowing. And it takes organizations like TWLOHA and, you know, people like you, Dr. Alana, to do the work and say, hey, you know, those narratives are incorrect, guys, and we have to change them. That's where TWLOHA comes in. And, you know, we address the stigma. We attend music events. We also, with our Find Help tool and our Find Help scholarship program, we also pay for therapy. So just being able to bridge that gap, because those are two of the biggest barriers, being able to find care and then being able to afford it, especially in this financial climate.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that because I think that's a really important element that for many people, mental health seems like pie in the sky, right? And one of the reason that I chose to focus on mental health education instead of mental health treatment was because it's important to recognize that mental health is for everybody, not just when you think of someone in a mental health crisis, you probably picture someone sleeping in outside under the highway, right?
Mhm.
But the reality is if you have a brain, you have a mental health landscape. Okay, you got a yard, and
Mhm.
grass is going to grow, bugs are going to come, weeds are going to show up, right? And it needs tending. And because we live in a society that is so long ignored emotions, now we can talk about all the traumas that our entire country is built on, which is just focusing on America, right? And we can tell the world story. That's going to be even worse, right? But if we just think about America, the way we were founded, nobody care about no emotions. What? Okay,
Mm.
you trail a tear yourself on down there, right? You're gonna come over here and get on this boat. We don't care what you think about it. So emotions, mental
Mhm.
health, what? We over here building a country, manifesting destiny. Okay. So the idea even of mental health has been so vilified, not only by the way that we have developed, but whether you're the oppressor committing heinous acts or the oppressee experiencing them, you're still going to sustain emotional damage. But in order to get through, what do? We pray, we sing, we dance, we throw ourselves into so many things that, I have to honestly say that trauma often drives people to greatness, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was actually reading a story the other day about Prince was one of his first concerts that he was opening for another band, and the crowd didn't like him. They threw stuff at him. They booed. He was like, they hate me, but they told him, hey, you really need to develop your band and your sounds. If you're playing big audiences, you need to be a big, make it a big deal. And
Mm-hmm.
hey, Prince, okay. And you think about it, you're like a person experiencing something like being booed and hissed and all that, like, yes, that you could imagine how painful that would be, and questioning everything that you've worked for and so when we think of suicidal crises, most people, like, you're in a bad mental state, so you're not looking at, like, where how can I find a psychiatrist or someone to help me. Matter of fact, you don't even know, do I need to see a psychiatrist, like a medical doctor? Should I go to a therapist, a counselor? Like, we use all these terms that people don't even fully know, like life coach. What? So there's
Mm-hmm.
all these barriers to getting into care, and then of course the money you talked about. It can be really expensive to see a provider, and it also is time consuming, even if it's, I'm going to go to my therapy appointment once a week for an hour or twice a week or whatever that looks like, because most of the time people can't even get seen that often. You still have to take time out of an already busy life where you may feel like you're underwater, right? Just right at the edge. So you all have done something very unique with your Find Help program, and I just want to emphasize those scholarships a little bit more so that you can tell people, like, how do they find it? How do they qualify for that? Tell us a little bit about that program.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, twloha.com/find help, you can see there's an option to select our scholarship, and it's our treatment and recovery scholarship, and we pay up to 3 months for therapy, up to $100. We kind of take into account some different factors, location, income, things of that nature, but we pay for those therapy sessions for that individual to go. We also have our Find Help tool, like you said, being able to access care. So our Find Help tool is a mental health database resource that has all types of mental health resources, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, across the United States. You can go on there and put in a zip code and results will pop up. And one thing that I do love about our Find Help tool is that we have a suggest a program link. So sometimes people don't know that these resources are out there. And if you do know a great organization and they're doing some good work, you can go and suggest that program to our tool. And on the back end, they'll research it and send that organization an email, and we'll go ahead and get them added to the tool so that individuals can have access to the services that they need. And then we also have a BetterHelp code to where you can get signed up for 3 months of free therapy through just a partnership that we're doing with them. So that's been a really useful tool, especially because, just with fundraising and things of that nature, our funding is limited for the treatment and recovery scholarship. So being able to have things like BetterHelp has been helpful. We have crisis text line number. You can text TWLOHA to them and get connected with them, 988. Just being able to have those types of resources that people may not know about, being able to provide them to them. We also created an app that has lists of resources, self-care tips, deep breathing, things of that nature.
Mm, I love that. First of all, thank you so much for your work. I'm grateful to TWLOHA for this work. And of course, anyone who may feel so moved to donate so that more people are able to access care, please think about adding TWLOHA to your donation list, because they are doing impactful work. And that's bridging that gap, right? There's so many things that people are facing, and especially in the heat of the moment, it can feel very daunting, especially if you're already under a significant amount of stress. I know personally for me, the first time that anyone talked to me about feeling suicidal, I was about 14. And I don't know about you. I don't know if you remember sort of your first time running across it, but I'll tell you this quick story. I had a teammate. I was playing sports, and I had a teammate that called me out of the blue. I don't even know exactly why she called me, because we weren't like super tight. But she called me and she was like, her little brother had broken something in the house. And she knew that when her parent got home, whoever that was, that they were probably going to beat them. They were in a household that was pretty intense, as far as I can recall. And so she was like, I'm just going to get rid of me and him. And I was like, you say what? So it was my first dive into, like, I kept her on the phone. I ended up getting some adults involved to help figure out what to do. But I say that to say that for many people, you're not going to be a psychiatrist or a trained suicide responder when you run across someone in crisis. More often than not, they touch other people, friends, family, other people start recognizing the signs long before they get to the professional. So this conversation is not just for the people who are practicing in mental health, but this is really for anyone who may come across a circumstance. And hey, it may be you. I may be speaking directly to you about a challenge or a time that you had in the past, or maybe one you might even be feeling now. But I think what's most important to understand is that on a biological level, when it feels like there's there's nothing I can do, right? I'm just forget it. I'm sick of it, right? Like, and I'll tell you, like, I've dealt with that as a professional. And in the beginning, of course, when someone expresses that they're suicidal, you're like, oh, right? Like, okay, now I have to go through the algorithm of thinking about, what I need to do to really get this person to connect to the help and to the healing. But what I have found is that the most effective tool was being a good listener and a good validator. Letting them get out whatever it is. And instead of trying to fix the problem or trying to tell them, no, you shouldn't feel that way. Because, you can't artificially just say, okay, I'll step out of it. Like, if people knew how to do that, we wouldn't have the problem, right? But to listen and then be able to say to them, hey, that sucks. Like, I can see how what that is that you're going through. I can see why that would be painful. I can appreciate why you feel the way that you do about it. And sometimes and I want to make sure that I emphasize that validation is not agreement, y'all. Right? You don't have to agree with the person or what they're saying or how they're describing it, because often you can see the hole in the argument, right? You can see where they're focusing in on like a little element of it and that there's other things that could be done. But in that particular moment, validating for that person that their pain is real, that their situation is scary and that are hurtful or harmful or whatever that looks like, that really is like soothing to a person who's in crisis. Any other tips or recommendations that you have that you've run across that you think are helpful, Bri?
I would definitely say, like you mentioned, just being in connection with your community. A lot of times there are free trainings being offered. There are online trainings that you can find to just get the tools necessary to be able to address those situations and scenarios when they do come up. I know TWLOHA, we do offer the QPR training, which is question, persuade, respond, I believe. But it just really teaches you how to, if you do encounter someone who's dealing with suicidal thoughts or, they're talking about it, it teaches you how to have those conversations, how to be present in that moment, things to say, things not to say, and even just being able to ask the question. Because like you stated, some people think if I say the question, if I say that word, then they're going to think about it. It's going to make them, want to do that. And like you said, that's definitely a stigma. But definitely just staying connected and educating not only yourself, but when you educate yourself, you're able to educate those around you. And once one person, I'm the person in my family who just, got started talking about mental health. Now we getting everybody in therapy. Everybody needs therapy. But, just being that person to step in and say, wait, this, we're not functioning healthily here. This is a little bit dysfunctional, guys. And people don't realize a lot of our behaviors, the things we say, the things of how we are as adults. It's rooted in childhood traumas and just the things that we've experienced. And a lot of those narratives and beliefs, like you said, are not true. They're inaccurate, but yeah, I would definitely say those couple of things: staying connected, education, knowing what resources are out there. So if you do need to provide them to someone, like you said, 988 is the simple, quickest, if someone's dealing with suicidal thoughts. But just being able to know those things, I think will definitely benefit the community in general as a whole.
Mm-hmm. There is something called a safety plan that
Mm-hmm.
is a good way of being proactive about identifying things that you can do if you find yourself in a suicidal crisis, or if you find someone that it doesn't even have to be somebody you care about. It could be a stranger. But making a safety plan is a good way to think ahead about what type of things tend to trigger those intense feelings, and then what can I do on my own to do that. Like for me, I keep playlists depending on what mood I'm in. And in some moods, like sometimes I want to have a good cry, right? I believe that crying is healthy,
Yeah.
not all the time, but having a time where you just give yourself time to think and release and process and whatever that's needed. That is actually a good way to not be holding all of it in, and those emotions slip out sideways, and slap the people in your life, or damage your professional circumstances when you let out, if you don't let those emotions out in some kind of controlled release. So I have a playlist that when I need to have a good cry, or I really want to process something, I put that joker on. Life, let's look at America. What are you doing, girl? You're in danger, girl. Okay. But I also have playlists for when I need to pull myself out of a woe is me kind of circumstance, when I need to bring my spirit up, when I need to connect to the ancestors, when I need to pray and really get into my spiritual bag. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. So when people are, and of course, if there's any other things that you could think about that are useful, but feel free to throw those in. But when you're doing the safety plan, you're thinking through, what can I do individually that helps me in the moment? What can I do socially? Like, can I go to a park? Does it help me to be around people, even if they don't know what's going on with me, just to see there's other humans going around, and maybe my crisis is not as big as it feels in the moment, right? Or going to maybe the church, or going to a game or something that just helps you to engage. I mean, it doesn't have to be a professional sports. It could be a high school or kid game, but
Mm-hmm.
just doing things within your community that can help you get through those moments. Because a lot of times surviving a crisis like that is about giving yourself something to do in the moment that helps keep you holding on another day, another day, another day. And then often the resolution, the thing that was really needed to help break through, presents itself. But if you act on it, act on the impulses before the resolution arrives, then of course we have another person to mourn, and another soul that we that's transition to the other side. So I think for me, when I start, working with clients, what I'm really trying to help them find are things that, one, support them externally, but then things that support them internally. Any thoughts about that, or anything you would add to that before we go to the next segment?
Just some additional resources I would definitely mention on our website. Our team actually created a mental health toolkit, and like you said playlist, and it reminded me of it. They asked like people on the team, like they just got a bunch of songs that help to lift people's mood, or different things, and they added playlists. They have worksheets, questions. It's just a mental health toolkit to educate you, to just provide you with a starting place. We also offer now peer support groups, which are offered virtually, and there are in-person groups. If you look in your area, you can go on Google, you can go on the Find Help tool, and just type in peer support. And peer support is in general, just a bunch of people coming around and talking about how, what they're going through, the things that they're experiencing. There are specialists who are certified peer support specialists, but they help to navigate those conversations. But, sometimes in the middle, I think one of our groups is like around the middle of the daytime. Sometimes, you went through the morning time and it felt like a whole week just in that morning. And you need to process, you just need a minute to say something. And sometimes people just need to get it out. Sometimes, like you said, sometimes it's not as big as we think, and we just need to process it out loud and say it. And it's so funny because there have been numerous times I would talk to my best friend and I would say something out loud and I'll be like, oh, I got it. I got it. I'm okay.
So like sometimes you hear yourself like, oh, okay.
It makes a difference. I just yesterday told my best friend, I was telling her how I was dealing with some, just thoughts of laziness. And, I really thought about it and thought backwards about it. And it was really rooted in just, trauma and not feeling like I was enough, not feeling like I was capable of accomplishing those things, and just false narratives that I had taken on. And every sentence I said it, I was like, just not thinking I won't get my wild dreams or my wild desires. And for everything that I named to her, I wrote back something that I have done in response to that. So one of my wild desires, I moved across the country to California by myself, drove to Cali. And I'm like, I have done those things. Those narratives, those beliefs are not true. So really challenging those, identifying them and challenging them to help you be, like you said, listening to what you were saying about the brain is just amazing to me, because I haven't, learned about that since psychology in my bachelor's program, but it's amazing. And it takes work, intentional work.
Absolutely. And for those of you who want to learn more about that, you can join my Trauma Recovery Academy. The Trauma Recovery Academy is a virtual institute. This is our school, and it's through my nonprofit organization, the Dr. Lana Trauma Recovery Institute, who also brings you this Demystifying Mental Health program. And in the Trauma Recovery Academy membership, we do educational coursework about the primitive brain systems that drive your internal mental health and these invisible surges and urges that are so powerful that it can make you even want to hit the delete button, right? So understanding your body, your brain, and how it creates your behavior through our online coursework. And then we have a monthly group coaching experience where those that are members can come together and talk about the challenges and how we apply the empathy skills practice tools to our day-to-day lives. So those of you who are interested, go to detry.org to learn more about our platform of the Trauma Recovery Academy. So since you mentioned that, I think it's really important for us to, one, differentiate that. I love how you mentioned peer support, because there's so many layers to mental health, and mental health can be done in all of those layers, as many as you can get to wrap around. Like we said, a lot of times when people are going through trauma, you feel so alone. You feel like nobody else would even understand how crazy I feel, how desperate I am to just, you just might want to tear off your own flesh sometimes. And some people do engage in self-harm, where it's like, I don't necessarily want to die, but I'm hurting myself because I want to make my physical manifest what's this invisible pain that I can't see, but I feel and I know it's there, but the world around me doesn't validate it, right? The world around me barely has the language to speak to why, like, this thing just makes me feel so terrible that I want to get out of here. I don't know about you, but I used to ride roller coasters. And you ride a roller coaster once, it's kind of fun. You ride it a few times, it's like, oh, this is pretty awesome. But by the time you get to 5 or 6, you right, you feel sick, right? You're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's how it starts to feel when people are going through these crises of self-harm and SI. It can become like, I just want to get off the roller coaster and I don't know any other way. But I have great news for you. There are so many things you haven't tried. So even if you've tried medicine, even if you tried some therapy, you haven't tried all medicine, you haven't tried every therapist, and you certainly have not yet been taught about the primitive brain systems that drive these internal sensations, and learn ways that you can activate your own brain and in a skills over pills method to help self-regulate. You shared with us, Bri, about how those thoughts were going through your mind, and you probably weren't paying attention to it in the moment, but you can think about like, okay, if I'm telling myself I'm lazy, I haven't done the things that I want to do in life, that's your brain. Those primitive brain systems are giving you a big elbow to the forehead, right? Like it's a UFC match with yourself, and that is a function, a feature of how our brain is programmed to go back to some of the things. The interesting part about traumatic experiences is that they happen like one time, maybe more than once, but like they happened in the past. But the thing that's most damaging is the thought process that gets programmed in there, that we start telling ourselves, I'm bad, I'm not enough, I haven't done it, other people do it better. I want my hair to be different. I want my face to be different. I want my body to be different. I wish this. I woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? I call it shoulding yourself, right? We walk around shoulding ourselves left and right about what should have happened, what we didn't do, what we wish somebody else had done. None of that is actual reality, right? But it's such a common way that our biology presents, so we think it's normal. And it is normal. It is a norm, but normal doesn't mean healthy, right? So the reason that I teach about these brain systems is because for many people, they don't even know that it's coming from your own internal perspective, that is coming from beliefs that were programmed in you back when you knee high to a grasshopper, and then carrying forward those things and steadily slapping ourselves psychologically with what we tell ourselves, that continues to drive the impact of the trauma way, way after maybe the situation has resolved or I'm out of that circumstance. I'm in something totally different. But what I tell myself is what's driving the bus for depression, suicide, and all the other elements of that. So it's really important to take it not just to peers, because peers can connect with where you are, and that's a beautiful thing. But actually going to the level of seeing a professional. Come on, y'all. We need to actually talk to people who have spent their life doing the work of knowing how to respond to these things and how to help you see. Going to a therapist is not talking to a friend. It's nice. Eventually you get to know the therapist and you get to know some things about them, but going to the therapist is about having some objective person who's not in your squad or circle, who might be trying to protect you or whatever their best is. They do not have a objective, unbiased opinion in this circumstance, right? Because your family, your loved ones, your best friend, they want to keep you here. They want to get you past whatever it is. Oh, girl, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. You better than that, right? They might tell you the thing that they think is helpful, but a therapist is trained to actually help you process, like, what is the underlying cause of this? How are my thought processes driving this circumstance? How are my actions and choices adjustable so that I can live a healthier life, or I can build positive coping tools instead of negative ones that cause me harm, like drinking or drugging or doing whatever other thing that creates damage in my life. So I just want to make that bit of a distinction, because a lot of times people just connect to what's closest to them and feels most comfortable, which are friends, family, peers. But especially if it's to the point where you're thinking of ending your life, it's really important to connect with people who have a deeper understanding, and also a deeper understanding of the resources available to support you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about with TWLOHA and the music events that you mentioned. What type of what that's a great concert, right? A great way to bring people out and take it outside of um, the typical programming. So tell us a little bit about those music events.
So we go to events all across the United States, EDC. I know we even go to Pride festivals. We go to different festivals across the United States. And the purpose is because those are the environments where, there is going to be the drug use, the substance use, like you said, people could be walking around with a smile on their face, and you never know what they're actually dealing with. But there have been so many people, and I love that I'm able to go to those events. Sometimes they need volunteers because we do try to get to as many as we can, or whoever will allow us to be at their event. But the times that I have gone, every single event I've went to, somebody has walked up to me saying how they knew about our organization, how our organization made such an impact in their life, how TWLOHA saved them when they couldn't be saved. And just to hear those things, it reminds me of my why. It definitely reminds me of my why and just what drives me. But yeah, we go to a lot of different events. You can check out our events page on our website, TWLOHA.com. Whatever events we are planned to go to will be on that website, on that link.
Awesome. So definitely check out TWLOHA at those events and make sure that you go up and check out the merchandise. You all do
Mm-hmm.
a great job of coming up with merchandise that really speaks to mental health. So dive in that shop. It is amazing, the things that they have. And every year, if I'm not mistaken, you all have a new slogan for the year as it relates to encouraging someone. It's amazing what a t-shirt can do, right? Just something that's right across your shirt. You never have to say anything to that person, but you all choose a message that just communicates so much. So what is this year's slogan?
Yes, so I'm pretty sure you're talking about every year we have a different suicide prevention campaign slogan, and this year it is "I hope you stay." Stay,
I hope you
please.
stay.
Yes,
I hope
stay.
you stay.
Um,
Please stay.
please stay, please. No, we do, and our design team does an amazing job coming up with the designs and just the sayings and things, because they're meant to be conversation starters. They're meant to be that piece of clothing that will have somebody walk up to you and say something to you that they needed to read that. Yeah, it's I hope you
Hmm.
stay. And we are
I hope you
fundraising for the money that we raise this month. So every year for Suicide Prevention Month, like you mentioned, we have our what our theme is. I hope you stay. And the money that we raise during this campaign goes towards the Treatment and Recovery Scholarship, so to be able to help pay for therapy. So you can fundraise for us. You can add it, on your social medias. We're grateful.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I hope you stay. Such a powerful statement and such a, we're in times where people are like, there's so many important things happening around us that my little stuff doesn't seem like that big of a deal. My little issue, nobody wants to hear about this. But the reality is that somebody cares, even if you don't have, even if you don't know it, you don't feel it in the moment. And that's often what happens, right? In the moment of intensity of thinking of whatever you're thinking of. I've heard people convince themselves of some of the most non-factual things, right? My kid would be better off without me. Well, you a parent committing suicide increases the risk of a child dying from suicide later on in life. So you're not doing your kid any favors by removing yourself, even if you think you're messing up things so bad, right? You don't want to lay that legacy for them. Yet in the moment, a person can be telling themselves, well, they'd be better off without me, without really envisioning the damage that that person would sustain. Or sometimes it's like, I want to get revenge. I want that other person to hurt because they made me hurt so bad. And I'm going to take myself out of here. And the other person is not going to necessarily have the response or reaction that you want them to have in that moment. But it's our brain is so powerful with convincing us the most damaging version of the story. That's why I teach about that, those primitive brain systems, because they are masters of shitty thinking. Okay. Subjective, harsh, intense, terrorizing to yourself. A lot of you all who have been my students know my acronyms, and y'all know
Yes.
how I like to come with those acronyms. So, subjective, harsh, intense, terrorizing to yourself thinking. That's how you know that primitive brain is in there. So when we say subjective, It's like when we'll use the example that we used earlier of like, if I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy, right? I had this thing I want to get done. I didn't get it done. So now I'm such a lazy bum. You never do anything right. If that's what I tell it to myself. Well, the word lazy is subjective, right? Like it's amazing to me how, they tried to call Black Americans lazy after all the time of coming out of slavery. Like, yeah, nah, bro. Telling somebody else. Like we
Yeah.
are some of the hardest working people in the world to trying to make it get stuff done. Now that's not everybody, but
Mhm.
it's statistically we hustlers, right? You may not we have to work harder oftentimes to get to the position that we have because we're working against other people's individual biases and the pain of dealing with being doubted and undermined all the time. But then when we talk about, okay, now we're in this space where we're recognizing all these invisible pains that are happening. And if I'm telling myself lazy, that maybe that came from a parent who was like, get up and do something. You so lazy, trying to help you. Like, this not to say that every parent is abusive or damaging on purpose, but
Mhm.
sometimes the people in our lives are using words that then get encoded into our brain, and we are using those same things to reference it. But like, what if I really have a reason that I don't move as fast? Or it's not acknowledging all the other things in my life that I'm accomplishing, although I'm not getting this particular thing done as quick as I want to. When we strip off that subjective term lazy and we look at like, oh wait, no, I do set goals, I meet them, I have made progress, so it's not true that I don't get things done. I just don't always do them in the time frame that I set for myself, which I might be setting unrealistic time frames. But as we pull apart that belief of I'm lazy and use more objective terms, like I didn't accomplish the thing the same at the deadline that I wanted, but I actually did get things done and have made progress in my life, you start to see how easily you can self-deceive into the pain of suicide, right? So it's important for us to recognize that there are layers of things that go into the healing process, not just getting through the acute. When we say acute, meaning like in the moment, the person wants to harm themselves, right? Sometimes that looks like inpatient hospitalization, right? Sometimes it looks like, hey, the person themselves recognizing I am not safe, I can't keep myself safe, and I'm going to allow myself to be in a mental health, a supportive environment where they may voluntarily go. Or sometimes the person may be in such a way that they cannot keep themselves safe, and that sometimes you, as a family member or loved one, have to engage with the mental health. Sometimes it's the constable, sometimes it's your city or state may provide mental health service, or some sort of law enforcement that can come and take the person to a hospital involuntarily if we feel like they're unable to keep themselves safe. So there's layers. That's the first layer of intensive treatment that someone may go to, even if it's only for a day or two or three, to be able to get past the intensity of the crisis, and also be connected to resources that give you. A lot of times I found that when we could provide someone with a roadmap, even if they haven't engaged in the process yet, it's just that hope of knowing that there are things out there. There are resources, there are people that care, there's things that we can do, can pull people out of that spiral. Any thoughts on that or anything you would add to that as it relates to your experience?
Well, one thing I thought of while you were talking. It was a book, and I can't remember the author of it, but the post traumatic slave syndrome. Have you heard of that
Joy
book?
DeGruy. Fabulous book. Joy
I
DeGruy.
just, I just started
GR.
that one, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize how deep rooted some of those, narratives and traumas are, and that's been amazing. Um,
Oh,
to
that's
just
a good one. I could give you a book list. That's what, and to your point, one of the things that she did a fabulous job of doing is connecting how our cultural programming, we think about, I grew up in St. Louis, and we joned, okay, as we called it. We called it joning, playing the dozens, roasting people. We different places have different words for it, but we would say, oh, develop tough skin, right? You got to have tough skin to be able to take it, which colloquially, like that's basically meaning I can get insulted and not and it not, break me down, right? I can have a comeback. I can develop a space where I don't take those as personal. But the reality is that in many ways, the way that we talk to each other, even when we're not trying to harm each other on purpose, those
Yes.
invisible words fly across space, smack them in their brain. They say something back, it flies across space and smacks you. All of that. And I'm not saying that is the only thing that
Right. Right.
drives the process, but it's understanding that all of us are part of each other's internal mental health landscape. So just having a deeper awareness of how your words impact not only other people, because just because they're invisible doesn't mean they don't do something, right? When you say it, you could be in a room by yourself. It's going to come out of your ear, out of your mouth, and go right back into your own ears. So the things that you say, the words that you use for yourself, it's killing me. Like if you say that, like I had to kind of correct a loved one the other day, like, okay, what you're experiencing is uncomfortable, but if you keep saying, oh, this thing is killing me, this thing is killing me, you feel so much more in that moment than if you use more measured words like, I am so uncomfortable right now. This is really painful. I don't like what I'm going through. But just that is the difference between a 10 out of 10 pain or a 7 out of 10 pain. This may be more manageable and leaves you enough light to be able to figure out, like, wait a minute, I don't have to think about it quite like this. I don't have to be in so much despair or distress about this circumstance. So that's just a little tidbit from Dr. Alana. I hope that that helps all of you. And I also just want to thank you all for joining us today for this episode of Demystifying Mental Health with Dr. Alana, trauma psychiatrist on blackdoctor.org. So before we go, because I know we're drawing to an end, Bri, can you tell us where people can find TWLOHA, where they can reach you if you want? Like what's some good following pages to follow to make sure that we are up on what's happening with TWLOHA?
Of course, the first place to go is TWLOHA.com. From there, you can find our Find Help page. You can access our store where we were talking about our shirts and things like that. You can also from there find our social media accounts. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on just about every social media platform. And then if you need to get in contact with me, you can email me at findhelp@twloha.com and I'll be able to get back to you. So definitely sign up for those email notifications, when we have things going on. It'll be awesome. It'll be worth it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Bri, and we're so happy to have you here today. For those of you who would like to learn more about my program, you can go to da-tri.org to learn more about the Trauma Recovery Academy membership, as well as make a donation to the Dr. Alana Trauma Recovery Institute, because through your donations is what drives our programming and our ability to provide low cost and no cost support and mental health education for the masses, including bringing you this program, Demystifying Mental Health, on BDO. We hope that this has been an enlightening episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here once a month on the fourth Thursday of the month from noon to 1, bringing you the best information, the neuroscience of mental health, and how empathy used to its deepest, most important range, empathy heals trauma. So thank you everybody for being here, and it's time to evolve. See you next time.